Through tears that blur the ink, Emma Williams signs the divorce papers her husband shoves across the table at his family's Christmas party, her hand trembling over her pregnant belly while the entire Morrison family erupts in laughter around her. Her mother-in-law, Catherine Morrison, raises a champagne glass in mock celebration as Emma's husband, James, stands beside his pregnant mistress, both of them smiling at the woman they're destroying. But none of them see the text message lighting up Emma's phone on the table. None of them recognize the name flashing on the screen. Dad. None of them know that the trembling woman signing away her marriage in tears is Emma Blackwell, the only daughter of Richard Blackwell, the billionaire whose companies employ half this city. Emma's hand shakes as she signs page after page, her tears falling onto legal documents that dissolve 3 years of marriage, while James's family celebrates like she's a disease they've finally cured. Her 7-month pregnant belly presses against the mahogany table, but no one in the Morrison family offers her a chair. They watch her suffer standing up, their Christmas party laughter echoing off marble walls paid for by money Emma secretly provided, living in a house whose deed carries a name they never bothered to read. Finally, Catherine Morrison announces to the room, her voice dripping with contempt as Emma signs the final page. My son is free from the gold-digging nobody who trapped him with a pregnancy. But the woman they call a nobody has a father whose net worth could buy their entire bloodline 1,000 times over. The woman they call a gold digger owns the very ground their mansion sits on. And the tears streaming down Emma's face aren't tears of defeat. James steps closer, his cologne suffocating as he leans down to where Emma stands hunched over the papers. You can leave now, he says, his voice cold and final. Jessica and I need to discuss nursery colors. Jessica, his assistant-turned-mistress, laughs from across the room, her hand resting on her own pregnant belly, 6 months along with James's second child, conceived while he was still married to Emma. The room erupts in fresh laughter, James's brother raising his glass. To upgrades, he shouts, and the Morrison family drinks to Emma's replacement like she's already a ghost. Emma's fingers curl around the pen so hard her knuckles turn white. She thinks about the day she met James 4 years ago at a hospital charity event where she'd been volunteering under her mother's maiden name, Williams, desperate to escape the suffocating world of billionaire galas and men who only saw her father's bank account. James had been different that night, or so she'd believed. He'd talked about his dreams of opening his own architecture firm, about designing homes for families who couldn't afford the big names. He'd held her hand and called her beautiful without once asking what she did for a living or where she came from. She'd fallen in love with his smile, with the way he sketched buildings on napkins while they talked. She'd believed he loved her for who she was, not what she had. She'd been wrong. The marriage started crumbling 6 months in when James's firm failed. Emma had offered to help, but he'd refused, his pride wounded by his wife's suggestion that he might need her. Then came the questions about her family, why she never talked about them, why they'd had a small courthouse wedding instead of something grand. Emma had deflected, still clinging to the fantasy that James loved her, not the money she was hiding. But Catherine Morrison had planted different seeds, whispering to her son about Emma's suspicious past, about how she must be hiding poverty and shame. The Morrison family had decided Emma was a gold digger climbing above her station, and they'd made it their mission to remind her daily that she didn't belong. Emma straightens slowly, her back aching from standing so long. She gathers the signed divorce papers with shaking hands, her wedding ring catching the Christmas lights one final time before she slides it off and places it on top of the documents. I hope she makes you happy, Emma whispers, her voice so broken that for a second, just a flicker of a second, something crosses James's face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of what he's destroying. But Jessica calls his name from across the room, and whatever moment existed vanishes. Catherine Morrison steps forward, blocking Emma's path to the door. Before you go, she says, her smile sharp as glass, I want you to know that we've already told everyone in our circle about your gold-digging schemes. Good luck finding another family stupid enough to take in a pregnant charity case. The words hit Emma like physical blows, each one designed to destroy whatever dignity she has left. Catherine's friends nod in agreement, their faces twisted with satisfaction at watching Emma suffer. Emma looks at Catherine, really looks at her, and something inside her shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms into something colder, something harder. Thank you, Emma says quietly, and the words confuse Catherine enough that she steps back. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. All of you. Emma's eyes sweep the room, landing on each laughing face, each contemptuous smile, memorizing them. James's brother, his sister, his aunt who'd sneered at Emma's grocery store clothes, his father who'd asked point blank if she was after the Morrison family money, all $60,000 of it. Emma walks toward the door, her phone buzzing again in her pocket. Dad. Calling for the 15th time tonight. She'd stopped answering his calls 2 years ago when she'd married James, too ashamed to admit she'd chosen love over her father's warnings. Richard Blackwell had investigated James Morrison the moment Emma brought him home, and he'd delivered the truth with the bluntness of a man who'd built an empire by seeing through people. He's marrying you for what he thinks you'll become, her father had said. The moment he realizes you're not giving him access to our world, he'll show you who he really is. Emma had called her father controlling and cut contact, believing James's promises instead. She'd been a fool. Emma pushes through the Morrison family's oak doors and steps into December cold that steals her breath. Snow falls softly, covering the driveway in white that looks pure until you remember what's underneath, frozen ground and dead grass. Emma walks to her car, a 10-year-old sedan she'd bought herself because James had said new cars were a waste of money, even as he'd leased himself a BMW with money she'd secretly funneled into his failed business. Her hands shake so hard she drops her keys in the snow, and when she bends to pick them up, her pregnant belly throws her off balance. She catches herself against the car, breathing hard, her tears freezing on her cheeks. The baby kicks, strong and insistent, and Emma places her hand over the movement. "I'm sorry," she whispers to her unborn daughter. "I'm so sorry I brought you into this." She thinks about James demanding a paternity test 2 months ago, about how his family had laughed when she'd cried. She thinks about Jessica moving into the home Emma had bought, sleeping in the bed Emma had shared with James, raising her child in rooms Emma had painted. The betrayal burns through her, hot and consuming, until she can barely breathe through the pain. Emma pulls her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. 17 missed calls from Dad, 12 text messages. The most recent one reads simply, "Emma, please, I'm worried." She stares at those words, at the concern from the man she'd pushed away because she'd been too proud to admit he'd been right. Her thumb hovers over his name, but shame stops her. What does she even say? That she'd thrown away her family for a man who'd thrown her away the moment she became inconvenient? But her daughter kicks again, and Emma thinks about what happens if she doesn't call. What happens if she tries to handle this alone, pregnant and divorced and broken? What kind of mother does that make her? She presses call before she can talk herself out of it, and her father answers before the first ring finishes. "Emma?" His voice cracks on her name, and the sound breaks something inside her chest. "Emma, where are you? Are you safe?" "Dad," Emma whispers, and then she can't say anything else because sobs take over, 3 years of pain and loneliness and betrayal pouring out of her in the Morrison family driveway. She cries for the girl who thought she could have a normal life, for the woman who'd believed love could exist without money complicating everything, for the mother who has to tell her father she'd failed at the one thing she'd been so sure she could do on her own. "Tell me where you are," Richard Blackwell says, his voice steady and sure. The voice of a man who's solved bigger problems than this, who's built empires from nothing. "Tell me where you are, and I'll come get you. We'll fix this, Emma. Whatever happened, we'll fix it." Emma looks back at the Morrison mansion, at the windows blazing with Christmas lights and celebration, at the family that destroyed her without ever knowing they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. She thinks about Catherine's champagne toast, about James's cold dismissal, about Jessica's triumphant smile. She thinks about the signed divorce papers and the golden wedding ring she'd left behind, and the 3 years she'd spent loving people who'd been planning her exit the entire time. "I'm at the Morrison house," Emma says finally, her voice steadier now, the tears slowing. "I just signed the divorce papers. They threw a party to celebrate, Dad. They made me sign while they laughed." She hears her father's sharp intake of breath, the dangerous silence that follows. Richard Blackwell didn't become a billionaire by letting people hurt his family without consequences, and Emma can practically hear him calculating revenge through the phone. "Stay there," her father says, his voice cold as winter. "Don't move, I'm 10 minutes away, and Emma, they have no idea what's coming." The line goes dead, and Emma stands alone in the snow, her hand on her pregnant belly, her tears finally stopping. Inside the mansion, the Morrison family celebrates their victory, completely unaware that the woman they just destroyed has made one phone call that will end everything they have. But Emma doesn't feel victorious. She just feels tired and sad and so completely done with trying to be someone she's not. She leans against her car and waits for her father, watching snow cover the Morrison driveway like it's trying to hide what happened here, like it's trying to make everything clean and new. But Emma knows better now. Some stains don't wash away, and some betrayals never heal. They just teach you who people really are when they think you can't fight back. The Morrison family is about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. Black SUVs roll up the Morrison driveway like a funeral procession, their headlights cutting through the snow and darkness with mechanical precision. Emma watches from beside her car as three vehicles park in perfect formation, their engines idling in synchronization that speaks of professional security teams and careful planning. The rear door of the middle SUV opens, and Richard Blackwell steps out into the December cold, wearing a coat that costs more than James Morrison's yearly salary, his silver hair catching the Christmas lights from the house like a crown. He walks straight to Emma, his eyes scanning her face with the intensity of a man cataloging every tear, every bruise to her dignity, every hurt he's about to repay tenfold. "Let me see you," he says softly, his hands gentle as he tilts her face toward the light. His jaw tightens when he sees her red eyes, the exhaustion carved into her features, the way she's holding her pregnant belly like she's trying to protect her daughter from a world that's already proven cruel. "I should have come sooner. I should have dragged you home 2 years ago instead of respecting your choice to cut me off." Emma shakes her head, fresh tears spilling over. "You were right about him, about all of it. I was so stupid, Dad. I thought I could have something real, something that wasn't about money or power or business deals. I thought he loved me." Her voice breaks on the last word, and Richard pulls her into his arms carefully, mindful of her pregnancy, his hand cradling the back of her head like she's still his little girl who scraped her knee on the playground instead of a grown woman whose heart just got shattered by people too blind to see what they had. "You weren't stupid," Richard says firmly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who's negotiated billion-dollar mergers and hostile takeovers. "You were hopeful. You wanted to believe in goodness. That's not stupidity, Emma. That's courage they don't deserve." He pulls back to look at her, his eyes hard as diamonds now, the softness reserved for his daughter replaced by something calculating and cold. "But hope doesn't mean you let people destroy you, and courage doesn't mean you suffer in silence when you have the power to make them understand exactly what they've done." Inside the mansion, someone notices the SUVs. Emma sees curtains move, sees faces appear in windows, sees the Morrison family's curiosity shift to confusion, then concern as they count the vehicles and notice the security team standing at attention. James appears at the front door, his confidence from earlier faltering as he takes in the scene, his eyes moving from Emma to her father to the small army of professional bodyguards surrounding them. "Emma," he calls out, his voice uncertain now. "What's going on? Who are these people?" Richard doesn't answer James. Instead, he turns to the man emerging from the lead SUV, a sharp-featured attorney in his 50s carrying a leather briefcase that probably contains enough legal firepower to level a small country. "Marcus," Richard says simply, and the attorney nods, understanding passing between them without additional words needed. 30 years of working together means they communicate in shorthand, in glances and gestures that speak volumes. Marcus opens his briefcase and removes a stack of documents, their weight and thickness suggesting this isn't a simple legal matter, but rather a comprehensive dismantling of everything the Morrison family thinks they know about their lives. Catherine Morrison pushes past her son, her earlier champagne confidence making her bold in ways she's about to regret. "What is this?" she demands, marching down the driveway in heels that sink into snow with each step. "You can't just show up here with your little intimidation tactics. We have rights. This is our property, and you're trespassing." She stops short when she gets close enough to really see Richard Blackwell, close enough to notice the custom tailoring, the watch that costs more than her house, the way he carries himself like a man who's testified before Congress and made senators nervous. "Your property?" Richard repeats, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's interesting. Marcus, what does the deed to 1247 Maple Ridge Drive say?" The attorney doesn't even need to consult his papers. The property is owned by Blackwell Holdings subsidiary Evergreen Properties LLC, purchased 18 months ago through a private transaction. The current occupants are residing under a lease agreement that, as of tonight, has been terminated due to breach of contract clause 17, subsection 3, hostile treatment of family members. Catherine's face goes white. "That's impossible. We own this house. We've owned it for 15 years. But her voice wavers now, the confidence cracking like ice under pressure. James steps forward, his face confused and defensive. "What are you talking about? Emma doesn't have any family with money. She's nobody. She works as a substitute teacher, for God's sake. She drives a car from 2015. Richard's smile could freeze oceans. "My daughter worked as a substitute teacher because she wanted to help children, not because she needed the money. She drove a modest car because she was testing you, Mr. Morrison. She wanted to see if you'd love her without knowing she's Emma Blackwell, sole heir to Blackwell Industries, Blackwell Technologies, Blackwell Real Estate Holdings, and approximately 47 other companies that collectively employ 180,000 people and generate $34 billion in annual revenue." The words land like grenades, and Emma watches James's face transform from confusion to shock to dawning horror as he does the math, as he realizes what he's just thrown away. His brother appears in the doorway, still holding his champagne glass, but his hand has gone slack and the crystal is tilting, about to spill. Jessica stands behind him, her earlier triumph replaced by something that looks like panic as she understands she's pregnant by a man who just lost access to wealth beyond her wildest imagination. "No," James whispers, but he's looking at Emma now, really looking at her for the first time in months, and he's seeing things he missed. The way she carries herself despite her grief, the bone structure that comes from generations of good nutrition and excellent health care, the education in her vocabulary that he'd dismissed as her trying to sound smart. "Emma, is this true? Are you really Richard Blackwell's daughter?" Emma doesn't answer him. She doesn't owe him answers anymore. Instead, she watches her father work, watches him dismantle the Morrison family with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a man protecting his child. "Marcus," Richard continues, "please inform the Morrison family of the additional complications to their situation." The attorney steps forward, his voice crisp and professional. "James Morrison, you are employed as a senior architect at Morrison & Associates, a firm that exists solely because of a capital investment from Blackwell Ventures 3 years ago. That investment is being withdrawn effective immediately, and the firm will enter bankruptcy proceedings by Monday morning. Catherine Morrison, you serve on the board of St. Mary's Children's Hospital, a position funded by annual donations from the Blackwell Foundation. Those donations cease immediately, and your board seat has been terminated. Thomas Morrison, your position as marketing director at Coastal Tech Solutions is eliminated as of tonight, as Blackwell Industries is severing all contracts with companies that employ individuals who have demonstrated hostile behavior toward family members." Catherine sways on her feet, her face gray now. "You can't do this. You can't destroy people's lives because your daughter got divorced. This is insane." But her voice has no power anymore, just desperate fear as she watches her world collapse in real time. Richard's expression doesn't change, but his voice drops even colder. "I'm not destroying lives because of a divorce, Mrs. Morrison. I'm responding to the fact that you forced my pregnant daughter to sign legal documents while you sat comfortable with champagne, mocking her pain. I'm responding to you calling my daughter a gold-digging nobody while she cried. I'm responding to you celebrating the humiliation of a woman carrying your grandchild." The word grandchild hits James like a physical blow. He stumbles backward, his hand reaching for the doorframe to steady himself. "The baby," he says, his voice hollow. "Emma, the baby is mine. I accused you of trapping me. I made you take a paternity test, but the baby is mine. And you're really Richard Blackwell's daughter, which means my child is the Blackwell heir." Emma sees the calculation in his eyes, sees him doing the math on what he's just signed away, not just a wife, but a dynasty. Not just a marriage, but generational wealth that would have made his children untouchable. "Your child," Emma says, her voice steady now despite the tears still wet on her face, "will carry the Blackwell name, not Morrison. Your child will grow up knowing her grandfather loves her unconditionally, but her father threw her away before she was even born because he was too busy with his mistress to value what he had. Your child will have everything, James, everything except you." The words destroy him. Emma can see it, can see James Morrison finally understanding what his pride and Catherine's poison and Jessica's manipulation have cost him. Jessica pushes forward then, her pregnancy evident as she moves. "James, we have a baby coming too. You said you loved me. You said we'd build a life together." But her voice is panicked now, because she's realizing that the man she thought was her ticket to a better life just became unemployed, homeless, and completely broke in the span of 5 minutes. James doesn't even look at her, his eyes locked on Emma with something that might be regret or might just be grief over losing access to billions. Richard turns to Emma, his voice gentle again, the ruthless businessman disappearing and the protective father returning. "You don't have to stay here another second, sweetheart. Let's go home. Your old room is exactly as you left it, and I've already called Dr. Chen to come check on you and the baby. We'll make sure you're both healthy, and then we'll figure out the rest together." He wraps his arm around her shoulders, supporting her weight as exhaustion finally crashes over her like a wave. But before Emma lets her father lead her to the SUV, she turns back to the Morrison family one final time. Catherine stands frozen on her driveway, her Christmas party ruined and her future demolished. Thomas has dropped his champagne glass in the snow, the crystal shattered and the liquid seeping into white like blood. James's father has appeared in the doorway, his face pale as he processes that his family just destroyed themselves by mocking the wrong woman. And James himself stands at the center of it all, his hand pressed to his chest like he's checking if his heart is still beating, his eyes full of everything he's lost and will never get back. "I loved you," Emma says to James, her voice carrying across the snow in silence. "I loved you so much that I gave up everything to be with you. My family, my name, my money, all of it. I wanted you to love me for me, not for what I could give you. But you never did you? You loved what you thought I could become, not who I was. You loved the idea of moving up in the world, and when you thought I was pulling you down, you threw me away like I was nothing." Her voice doesn't break this time, doesn't waver. She's done crying for James Morrison. "Emma, wait!" James starts forward, but Richard's security team moves in synchronization, blocking his path with bodies. Trained to protect the Blackwell family from all threats, including desperate ex-husbands. "Emma, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The baby, think about the baby. She needs her father." But Emma is already walking toward the SUV, her hand in her father's, her future opening up in front of her like a door she'd closed 3 years ago and can finally walk through again. "The baby needs a father who values her mother," Emma says without turning around. "The baby needs a father who wouldn't force a pregnant woman to sign divorce papers while standing. The baby needs a father willing to fight for his family instead of replacing them the moment things get difficult. You're not that father, James. You never were." She climbs into the SUV with her father's help, the leather seats soft and warm, so different from the cold driveway and colder family she's leaving behind. Richard slides in beside her, and Marcus closes the door with a solid thunk that sounds like finality, like the closing of a chapter Emma needed to end months ago. Through the tinted window, Emma watches the Morrison family stand in their driveway, their Christmas lights still blazing cheerfully like nothing has changed, like their entire world didn't just end. Catherine has her hand over her mouth, finally understanding what her cruelty cost. Thomas is arguing with his father, probably about money, about lawyers, about how to fix this, and James just stands there, staring at the SUV like he's watching his future drive away. Because he is. The convoy pulls away smoothly, leaving the Morrison mansion behind. Emma leans her head against her father's shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in 3 years. "What happens to them now?" she asks quietly, not because she wants revenge, but because she needs to understand what comes next, what her phone call triggered, what her father's love looks like when channeled through business and power. Richard's hand covers hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in the same comforting gesture he's used since she was small. "They lose everything they didn't earn," he says simply. "The house, the jobs, the social standing built on donations from our foundation. They lose the reputation they valued more than they valued you. And they wake up every morning for the rest of their lives knowing they threw away the Blackwell heir because they were too blind to see past their own prejudice." He pauses, then adds more softly, "But that's not your burden to carry, Emma. Your job now is to heal, to prepare for your daughter, to remember that their blindness doesn't define your worth." Emma closes her eyes, feeling the exhaustion in every bone, feeling her daughter moving inside her, feeling the weight of the last 3 years lifting like fog in morning sun. The SUV glides through Connecticut streets toward the Blackwell estate, toward home, toward the life Emma walked away from and is finally ready to reclaim. Behind them, the Morrison family faces a Christmas morning that will arrive with eviction notices and termination letters and the complete destruction of everything they thought they had. But Emma doesn't look back anymore. She's done looking back. She's looking forward now, toward her daughter's future, toward her own healing, toward the family that never stopped loving her even when she pushed them away. The divorce papers are signed, the marriage is over, but Emma Blackwell is just beginning. And the people who tried to destroy her are about to spend the rest of their lives wishing they'd offered her a chair. 6 months pass, like pages turning in a book Emma thought was finished, but is actually just beginning a new chapter. She stands in the nursery of the Blackwell estate, sunlight streaming through windows that overlook gardens her daughter will someday run through, her hand resting on the crib where 3-week-old Grace Blackwell sleeps peacefully. The room is painted soft yellow, filled with toys and books and every comfort money can provide. But more importantly, filled with love from a grandfather who spent the first hour of his granddaughter's life crying tears of joy while holding her tiny hand. Emma hears the sound she's been waiting for, her father's footsteps in the hallway, steady and sure. Richard appears in the doorway holding a folder, his face carefully neutral in the way that means he has news Emma needs to hear but won't like. "The final reports," he says quietly, moving to stand beside her at the crib, both of them watching Grace sleep with her small fists curled against her chest like she's already fighting the world. Emma doesn't ask him to summarize. She already knows most of it from Marcus's weekly updates, but hearing it all together hits differently. The Morrison family lost everything. The house was auctioned to pay debts they'd hidden for years behind borrowed wealth and maxed credit cards. Catherine's charity position disappeared, along with her social standing when people realized the Blackwell Foundation had been her only claim to importance. Thomas moved back in with his parents until they couldn't afford their apartment either. All three of them now living in a 2-bedroom rental across town that costs more than they can manage. James's architecture firm collapsed spectacularly, taking his professional reputation with it, and now he works at a mall kiosk selling phone cases for minimum wage, while Jessica, who left him the moment his bank account hit zero, raises their son alone on government assistance. "He's been calling," Richard says carefully, and Emma's hand tightens on the crib rail. "Every day for 6 months. He leaves messages. He sends letters. He's begging to meet Grace, to apologize, to explain." Richard pauses, his voice heavy with the weight of a father who wants to protect his daughter from more pain, but knows some decisions aren't his to make. "The legal team says we can block him completely. Parental rights can be terminated given his abandonment, his forcing you to sign divorce papers while pregnant, his documented cruelty. You'd never have to see him again, and Grace would never have to know he existed." Emma looks down at her sleeping daughter, at the tiny person who has her father's nose and Emma's eyes, who will grow up with every advantage but also every complication of being a Blackwell. She thinks about James, standing in that driveway watching everything he'd destroyed drive away. Thinks about the messages Marcus plays for her sometimes, where James's voice breaks with genuine regret. She thinks about what kind of mother she wants to be, what kind of woman Grace should see when she looks at her example. "No," Emma says finally, her voice steady. "Grace deserves the truth when she's old enough to understand it. She deserves to know her father made terrible choices, but that I chose not to perpetuate pain. Block him for now, while she's small and I'm still healing. But someday, when Grace asks about her father, I'll tell her the truth without poison. I'll tell her he was weak when he should have been strong, but that weakness doesn't mean she's not loved completely by the family who showed up." Emma touches Grace's sleeping face, marveling at skin so soft it seems impossible. She'll know her grandfather walked through fire for us. She'll know her mother survived heartbreak and came out stronger, and she'll know that revenge isn't healing, it's just another kind of pain. Richard's eyes shine with tears he doesn't hide. "You're a better person than I am," he says, pulling Emma into a gentle hug. "I'd burn everything James Morrison ever touched and feel no guilt." Emma laughs softly against her father's shoulder, the sound lighter than it's been in years. "You already did burn everything he touched, Dad. You just left him alive to learn from it." They stand together in the nursery, 3 generations of Blackwells in one room, the past healed and the future sleeping peacefully in yellow sunlight. Emma thinks about the woman who signed divorce papers while crying at a Christmas party, thinks about how completely broken she felt in that moment. That woman thought her life was ending. That woman thought she'd lost everything. But that woman didn't know yet that sometimes you have to lose everything false to find everything true. Sometimes you have to sign away the wrong future to make room for the right one. Grace stirs in her crib, her eyes opening slowly, and when she sees Emma, she smiles that toothless baby smile that makes everything worth it, every tear, every heartbreak, every moment of pain that led to this perfect morning. Emma lifts her daughter carefully, breathing in that new baby smell, feeling tiny fingers grip her own. "Hello, my love," Emma whispers. "Welcome to your beautiful life." Outside, snow begins to fall, covering the Blackwell estate in white, making everything clean and new. And somewhere across town, James Morrison probably watches the same snow and thinks about the family he destroyed, about the daughter growing up without him, about the moment he signed away the most valuable thing he'd ever have. But that's his story to carry now, his lesson to learn. Emma's story is different. Emma's story is about a woman who survived betrayal, reclaimed her power, and chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy her. That's the story Grace will inherit, not one of revenge, but one of resilience, not one of bitterness, but one of strength. And when Grace is old enough to understand, Emma will tell her that sometimes the people who try to break you accidentally set you free instead, and that freedom, that fierce and hard-won freedom, is worth everything it costs. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories of strength, redemption, and the kind of justice that reminds us that dignity can never be taken, only given away. More powerful stories coming soon.